My name is Katie Harris, and I am an internal medicine physician at the University of Iowa. And I'm also one of, or I guess I'm the governor for the ACP chapter of Iowa. And I'm really excited to talk with you all today. I honestly don't know who's all in the audience. I'm guessing mostly medical students. But if there are medical students, residents, fellows, personal statements are applicable to really any stage of life and actually career. My husband is not in medicine, and he was recently applying to a new position and had to write a personal statement. And he asked me for my opinion. I'm not sure that he liked my opinions, but it was still important in his life. So I'm really happy to cover this topic with you guys. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question if you have one while we're talking, or you can put it in the chat. And I'm hoping Jennifer can help me if I miss the chat. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. This is meant to be, really practical advice and helpful for you as you guys are preparing to write personal statements. So we'll get started here. So we're going to talk about how important personal statements are in your application process, whether it be to residency, fellowship, or to career jobs. We'll talk about some qualities of personal statements that are successful. And one of the main things I wanted to do today is get you guys thinking. So thinking about what could I write about in a personal statement? So I'm going to give lots of examples just to try to see what's stirring in your brain right now, because the sooner you think about these things, the easier it is to write your personal statement. And then I'm going to give some do not do's. So things not to do, because I think it's always easy when people say, oh, these are really great ones. But I wanted to give some examples of things that might fail. So we'll go over some of those. And then really, like I said, motivate you to start thinking about your own personal statement. So I love this beautiful picture of this straight road, which many of you have not traveled on your way to medicine, and you will not travel through your path in medicine. So although there's this direct route and straight line that I wrote from college to medical school and medical school to residency and residency to fellowship, it's often not that straight. And one thing I really wanted to emphasize is use those turns or those curves in your career to your advantage in your personal statement. So, you write a personal statement to get into medical school, you write one to get into residency, you write one to get into fellowship. And a lot of you, have already completed one to go from college to medical school. And a lot of you had time in between college and medical school doing really fascinating things. So one thing I wanted to just start off pointing out is use that to your advantage. Talk about things that you've done before medical school. One big question I get from students who are writing their statements is, well, I wrote about that in my personal statement to medical school. Can I still write about that in my personal statement to residency? And the answer is yes. So most people who are reviewing your application to get into medical school are not the ones who are reviewing your application to get into residency. And some of those major factors in your life upon which you base your personal statement, they probably don't change. So it's okay to reuse topics and themes in your personal statements. And this is this personal statement from medical school into residency that I'm guessing most of you are focusing on right now. So you may be wondering, well, why is this lady talking to us about personal statements? And, for the last 12 years of my career, I've been in charge of recruitment. So I probably read 500 personal statements every year for the past 12 years. And so I want you guys, instead of making me feel like this, I want you guys to make me feel like this. Like, I'm so excited to read this. What's going to happen? And you might think that I'm overly excited about personal statements, but honestly, some are so good. And sometimes I just think even reading through people's applications, I think, I know you have more about you, and I wish you would share it with me. So I'm hoping that I'll give you some ideas about what to share in your personal statement. So why are personal statements so important? Well, I think one of the big reasons is that the application itself is pretty structured. And so personal statements are really the time where me or somebody, whoever is reviewing your application, really can get a better picture of who you are as a person. And you can go off script. So you don't have to have this like tiny one sentence thing to tell us, describe one experience type of thing, or describe what you did in this extracurricular activity. You get to pick. So you can go off script. And you can discuss lots of different topics that there really isn't space for in other places of the application. So why is medicine important to you? Why do you want this certain subspecialty? Why are you inspired by medicine? And really, I love the show House Hunters. I think I am like voyeuristic at heart, which I think most of us are. But really, this, like, I feel like I'm this little girl, like looking through the window, being like, who is this person? Because a lot of the other data in your applications really don't tell me much about you as a person. And I'm excited to learn about you as a person when I read your personal statement. Okay. So don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to like tell me what your personal statement is about. This is time to start thinking about things. So thinking about big topics, okay? So why are you applying to this specialty? It's not because you're going to get rich from this. It's not because your mom or dad or some mentor told you to do so. Hopefully it's not your backup plan to being an influencer. So think about like what drew you to medicine originally. So you could go with what drew you to medical school or what drew you to this subspecialty. And these are just some things to kind of start you thinking, like, was it something from childhood? Was it something in that time between college and medical school that really made you think medicine is for me? Was it maybe family experiences? If you're going more towards this subspecialty or this specialty, was it what happened on rotations that maybe inspired you towards this area? And then start thinking about why would you in particular be a good doctor, or why would patients want to be seeing you? And then you could start thinking about like, personality traits. Like what do you have that patients would be drawn to? What experiences have you had that you've learned from? And I wanted to just give you a couple of samples to kind of compare and contrast to make a point, okay? So after we go through these two, I'll see if anybody wants to participate. These aren't hard questions. There's no wrong answer. So this first sample, so sample A will say, when I started medical school, I decided I wanted to go into a surgical subspecialty because that had been my only experience in medicine thus far. I worked with a doctor in rural Iowa over the summer between my M1 and M2 year. It was then that I knew why I wanted to be in family medicine. I saw that Dr. J not only cared about the patient's diseases, but the patients themselves. She knew of one patient's struggles with weight loss, knew that another patient had just lost a child, and knew that one just lost his job. I want to be a doctor to care for people, not just their diseases. So there's a small snippet from one, okay? And then I want you to compare it to this second one. I'll read it for you too. When I started medical school, I decided that I wanted to go into surgical subspecialty because that had been my only experience in medicine thus far. I worked with a family medicine doctor in rural Iowa over the summer between my M1 and M2 year. I enjoyed this experience and focused my schedule towards more family medicine rotations. I also led the family medicine interest group, which developed my skills in leadership. I volunteered for a local football team to help with sports-related injuries to gain experience in all different areas of medicine. I then devoted time to researching within the family medicine department focused on mild cognitive impairment. Okay, so any people want to tell me why might I be leaning more towards liking sample A? So I gave you a hint in this first line.
Added like a reflection on the experience that the applicant had versus just like listing off their resume.
Yes, you nailed it. Thank you for speaking up. Yes, so this is telling me about the experience, right? And what excited them. And from that, I can really tell what excites that person, what personality traits they have, like what the impact was. Whereas sample B is much less personal because it's basically a regurgitation of their CV. Now, some people might say, but that person did a lot of great things in family medicine. So why shouldn't they put that in their personal statement? My answer is it's everywhere else in your application. So when I'm reviewing applications, I can see that you're the leader of the family medicine group. I can see that you're doing research in mild cognitive impairment. But what I can't see is how that experience in family medicine impacted you. So that's exactly right. So thank you for speaking up. So this this statement is a time to tell me things that I cannot glean from other areas of your application. Okay. So I think you can start thinking, and I just wanted to, once again, get your brains going. So what initially drew you to medicine and the specialty? So family, friends, and individuals, you guys as individuals, have often had experiences in the medical field that have really drawn them. And once again, you can use the same experience you used for your medical school personal statement for your application. And then talking about experiences in medical school. So maybe it was a mentor, maybe it was a patient. Think about what drew you and be specific. So this is nice where you can start kind of delineating. So this is when you can say like, well, I'm in internal medicine, so I tend to talk about internal medicine stuff, but was it that patient with lymphoma that we just, the diagnostic challenge? Was it trying to help somebody, find a better home to leave to go to the hospital? Was it helping others? Was it supporting someone? Maybe it was a bad experience that you or a family member had, and that really changed your view of the medical field. And I wanted just to give you guys some examples. And I asked the people who wrote these personal statements, and I did change a couple things just to make sure that they were anonymous still. But here are some ideas just to get your brain cooking. So this is kind of based on the theme of what initially drew you to medicine. So this first one, so she said, when I was 12 years old, my grandmother died in the back of a rickshaw
What?
we were riding in. Oops, somebody's unmuted. All right, we're going. She was like a cat. I thought she had died 8 times before, but this time it was real. I was frustrated by her many diseases that should have been treated, but due to her lack of access to healthcare, that was not possible. Okay, so there's one example. And then another one. I was watching a TV show when I was a child when I first heard about physicians. One of the characters had to go to the hospital and they showed a kind-hearted doctor there to take care of him. No one in my family had ever gone to high school or college, and I had no idea what it took, but that cartoon doctor had started me on a path. So these are very different stories, but both are very, very personal. So I gave you just, one or two sentences there, and you can glean a lot from that. So the first one, I knew that she grew up abroad. She didn't have access to healthcare, and she really had a desire to provide care for patients who were suffering disparities in healthcare. And in the second one, this is a person who grew up in a family without access to healthcare. None of the family members of this person had higher education, and thinking through how determined that person had to be to get to this place where they are applying for residency, that shows me a lot of dedication and a lot of grit. All right, so think about a story from your life. So now I'm going to give you some more prompts to kind of start thinking. So it's actually quite easy to draw parallels from lots of different themes in your life. So I wanted to give you some examples, and I'm going to give you like specifically what the people wrote about, just so that I can get your brain churning. So a musician. So I remember one person wrote about being a violinist, and she wrote about how growing up, she was always a solo violinist. And in high school, she had joined the orchestra, and she wrote about how challenging it was because she had been used to being an individual violinist. And when she joined the orchestra, she kept getting kind of corrected by the conductor, by her orchestra leader. And it was during that time she realized how important teamwork was. And she kind of drew a parallel to teamwork in medicine and talked about working with, the nurses and the social workers and her team on rotations. And I thought that that was a really well done example. Another person was an artist, and I loved this one. He talked about using negative space in art. And he compared that to the quiet times with a patient. And he gave an example of when his team was delivering bad news to a patient. And he talked about the importance of silence in that situation and the parallel to the negative space in art. And I thought that was really well done. A lot of sports parallels. So anything that you have to work really hard to get, that applies to medicine too. So a lot of people talking about, the teamwork, the training. One that really stood out to me was a young woman who talked about how she was on the crew team in college, and there were, I'm sorry, I don't know much about crew, but I think that there were two people in the boat, and her boat mate, I guess I would call it, had what they later found out was vocal cord paralysis. And so her friend would start having trouble breathing and pass out. And she talked about how terrifying this was, which I mean, I think we can all imagine how terrifying that is when your like boatmate passes out in the middle of water, and you're the only one rowing there. But talked about how she really wanted to learn more about medicine so that she could help her friend and help others who are having medical problems. Some of the ones compared to TV shows I think are really funny. I still remember some talking about like, that, those medical drama shows, whether it's, I'm totally blanking on it right now. The old one was ER. What's that one now? I'm totally blanking. I don't know. I can't remember it. But the popular
Grey's
medical.
Anatomy.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I'm like, there are like 25 seasons of it and I can't think of it. Thank you. Yeah, Grey's Anatomy. So talking about their love of, seeing those shows and seeing how people worked to get to help the patient. And one of them talked about, she talked about watching that Angela Lansbury show. I'm blanking on the name of that one also, but these like mysteries, and she'd watch them with her grandma and how she loved solving mysteries. And she compared that to internal medicine, like solving the mysterious diseases. So I thought those were really fun. Books. So if you think about a lot of fields in medicine, we're really drawn to the stories, right? So learning the details about patients, much like you love the details in the books that you're reading. So family life, this comes up a lot. So whether you're caring for a family member with a medical disease, I've read some really good ones about, parents who are in medicine, parents who have been afflicted with medical diseases. There was one really beautifully written one about a young woman who had a brother with a congenital disease and trying to find physicians. She was from a different country and trying to find physicians to care for him and how challenging that was. It was just really well done. So achievements. So one that I started reading and I remember being like, what? Like, so this gentleman was talking about knitting a sweater. And he was talking about like how he started off being, he didn't know how to knit at all, and he thought it was going to turn out terribly, and he just kept persisting. And he was kind of just drawing, the parallel to like starting in medical school where you feel like you don't know anything and kind of persevering. And by the way, he wore the sweater in the interview and he showed it to me and it was amazing. So I still remember that one. So jobs. So I love hearing about, other jobs people have worked and what you've learned, whether it's whether you're customer service and you learn that not everybody's always very nice or in really stressful situations, how do people handle it and what did you learn from that situation? So I'm trying to point out that, like, I'm sure most of you have watched some TV show, have read a book, are involved in music or art or sports or something that you could draw a parallel to. And we're all drawn to the stories. So the most impactful personal statements are ones that read like a story, right? Not like a resume. And then you could talk about experiences in medical school. So here are some other ideas. So patients that you've cared for that have inspired you. So maybe, especially if you're going into like pediatrics, was it a child in a certain situation that drew you to that? Or was it a patient who had a trauma that really drew you to orthopedics? Or maybe it was mentors that you've really connected with while you've been on rotations. And not just listing who that mentor is, but what characteristics do they have that inspired you? Because things that inspire you tell me a lot about you as a person. So make sure you describe that experience. So was it personality traits? Was it interactions with the patients? Maybe it was teaching and interactions with the learners. What did you glean from that experience? And then think about things that you would want to see in a doctor. So I've listed a bunch of traits that I'll just kind of click through to kind of get you to start thinking. And this is, I think I like looked up like what traits do you want in a doctor, some Google search or something. And these are common ones. So compassionate, empathetic, dedicated, knowledgeable, yeah, honest, understanding, competent. So these are all great descriptors and qualities. And these are important. And I also wanted to point out, what are program directors looking for? And there are going to be similarities, right? Like this is a good list of qualities that you'd want in a doctor, but there are a couple of other ones too. So grit is a big one. So grit's a word that comes up a lot, right? Dedication and commitment to the field, right? Because this is a long training process. And we, when we're reading your application, know that you want to stick with this. Humility, very important. Because in medicine, we're constantly learning and we're constantly realizing what we don't know. Empathy for your patients and for your coworkers, passion for medicine, humanity. And I think one of the most common questions I get from people who are applying is, well, you listed all these great things, but like, how do I show programs that I'm empathetic, or how do I show them that I'm honest? And I think the key word in there is show. So the key is to show, not to tell. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here to think through. So the first one, so I am dedicated to my patients, compassionate towards others, and understanding of patients' concerns. Sorry, I forgot an apostrophe there. Um, so I think that's a great statement. But how do you kind of provide an example of that? How do you provide validity to that? So here's another example. On my very first rotation, I admitted a gentleman who was actively dying. I knew that I would stay with him until his last breath. His family would not be able to make it to the hospital in time, and he did not want to be alone. We talked about his family, his life, his fears. In that 1 hour, I learned more about the kind of doctor that I want to be than on any other rotation to follow. So I think that that's really, that statement there, those couple of sentences show me that this person is dedicated to their patients, that they are compassionate, that they are understanding of their patients' concerns. So I know it's not easy to kind of cover every single trait that you want, and that's okay. But I really think picking those main traits that you want to show and demonstrating those through a story is how you're really going to grab people's attention. And then avoiding I statements. And this is hard. It's your personal statement, right? So like saying I want this or I did this, like that's common. But I think the thing to think about is like, how is that reading to somebody else? So here's an example. So in my research endeavors, I was able to discover the cause of premature atherosclerotic heart disease. Wow, that'd be amazing if somebody did. Okay, but this is just this one's a made up example. But maybe a better way to phrase it would be to say, one of my loves in medicine is research. I worked with a team of researchers studying premature atherosclerotic heart disease, and we made the discovery that. So that's where we comes in, right? So yes, you're saying I worked with, but you're not saying I discovered this. And I didn't put this example in there, but one that really comes to mind is I remember reading a personal statement where the student was describing a very complicated, medically complicated patient. And in there was one line where they said, like, I diagnosed this patient with X. And it was a really incredibly rare disease. And all I could think was like, you alone diagnosed that patient, like I wouldn't say that as an attending. I would say like our team, like you probably had 15 consulting teams on board, like working together. And so to just kind of take all of that and say like, I did this, it just seemed a little much. So I think trying to incorporate we and the team in there is always helpful. So putting this all together, so think about experiences that have sparked for you, have sparked an interest in medicine. Think about people that have inspired you, and that could be the patients, the doctors you work with, family members. And describe your feelings surrounding these people or events and how they impacted you. So those are like the keys to the storytelling aspect. And start with something catchy to get the attention right away. And I talked about picking, a few traits that you want to make sure that you get across. It's really hard to cover 7 different things. So I would really try to pick a couple of themes, maybe just one, maybe two, but you're going to have to keep it to a page. But try to focus in on the most important things you want to communicate, instead of trying to have 8 different small paragraphs covering lots of different things. Okay, so those were a lot of the what things should you do. Now we get to cover some of the like, don't do this. And I'll try to give you guys some examples as we go. All right, so what not to do. So we covered this. Reiterate your CV, right? Like it's just boring. I have already read that. I don't want to read your CV again. Okay. Make grammatical errors. I love this little like screen grab here. So this is tough because you're going to be rereading your personal statement multiple times. So this is really where you need to have somebody else review it for grammatical errors and be specific with that person. Say, I'm not having you read this for content. I'm having you read it for grammar because you're going to get lost in your own writing. So it's nice to have somebody else look over it. So I put be partisan. So our country is very political right now, and being political is not bad, right? So being political by like advocating for your patients, advocating for certain things. But I would really encourage you to stay away from like being partisan in your application or in your personal statement. You just never know how people are going to take different things. So of course, like stand up for what you want, but just be careful and try not to fall into partisan lines there. Don't beg. So I think, when you're applying for residencies, I don't want to see somebody being like, I really want you to take me, please. I think you're the best ever. It just doesn't come off well. You guys are really, really well qualified. You guys are adults who have been doing wonderful jobs. And so I think putting your best foot forward and not seeming desperate is a good thing. Lie, copy, and steal. So none of these are good. Um, I will admit, I think that I've only caught 2 people that, and I won't say lie, I will say misrepresent. And that they usually happen through flukes, right? So like a brother's friend knows this family or something, and something comes to light that it's like, oh, that's interesting. The medical world can be small, right? So I know it's huge, but it's weird. There are some weird coincidences. So don't lie, copy, or steal. Um, I was talking with some people about this, and I said, gosh, I wonder how much AI is going to be playing in personal statements. And I really don't know about that. I think my leaning would probably be, gosh, this is like the personal part. It's called a personal statement. So I don't know that I would be too inclined to be using AI to be writing your personal statement. So I'd probably recommend staying away from that. So I said ask somebody for help with grammar. But if you ask everyone their opinion, you're going to get lots of different opinions on your personal statement. So this is where I would really target who you want feedback from. And maybe that's like a trusted mentor in the field that you're applying to. Maybe it's one of the program directors that you work with. Maybe it's a faculty that you've worked with well. But if you're asking everybody, you're going to get different opinions. And then I feel like you're going to feel a little bit lost as to which way to go. So I would kind of target your audience and figure out who you really want opinions from. Be creepy. So this one's hard to describe. But I think I really can only think of one that was creepy. I don't even know that I can describe why it was creepy. I don't think you'll be creepy in your personal statement. And I think it's just one of those like gave me like weird heebie-jeebies after reading the personal statement. That's a turnoff. I usually don't like to like work with creepy people. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific on that, but I guess if anybody gives you feedback that it's creepy, like take heed because that's important. Being overly confident and egotistical. So this comes like back to the I statements, right? So this is where using the we statements, kind of showing, not telling becomes really important. And I love this one. Like you don't need to like brag about yourself. I love this little meme just because like, yeah, lion will never have to tell you it's a lion, right? So you don't have to tell me that you're the most empathetic person ever. Like show that, demonstrate that, like we talked about. And I've actually, when I was like preparing for this, I Googled like show, not tell, or show, don't tell. And there's a bunch of like kids writing tips for these. So if you Google it, you can find these like, how do you show people that you're angry? How do you show people that you're curious? So if you need descriptors or ways to show certain qualities, you can Google it and find out ways that you can show it instead of telling it. And then this is one that I never liked. I don't like it. I didn't like it when I would have an applicant telling me what I should be looking for. So there were some that were saying like, as a residency program, you should be looking for like intelligent, hardworking, driven, blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of like, I'm kind of like her, like, don't tell me what to do. Like, I know what I'm looking for. And that just kind of comes off once again as a little more like egotistical. So I would stay away from that. Then I just wanted to give you a few more examples, just of some ideas. And then we'll start wrapping up and we'll see if you guys have any questions. So a few more examples to get you thinking. When I first told my dad that I would be relaxing over Christmas break, I didn't think too much about the look on his face. When he woke me up on my first day of break at 5 a.m. to go work with him at his electrical company, I realized he had been planning this for 1 month. So I love this one. And this one was really talking about how this young woman worked with her dad in his electrical company and was like going through all these crawl spaces and running wires places and how a lot of the team didn't really trust her at first and how she really had to like work hard and be dedicated and kind of prove herself. And, to me, that showed a lot of grit, a lot of dedication, a great work ethic and it was funny, it's just it's funny to read about her dad kind of doing that to her. This one was not funny, but very impactful. So my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer and given two options: the medication we could not afford or go home to die. So this was a really challenging situation that the student had been through with their grandmother and trying to decide like we're the rock in a hard place. Like, what are we going to do? And in this situation, they had a really bad experience with the medical team. And so how that impacted her moving forward and, what kind of doctor she wanted to be really kind of stemmed from this really bad interaction with the medical system. I love this one. So it started off, I was standing in the hot sun in my full gear. The air was as thick as the tension. My boots were tight and socks were sweaty. We began our march with intensity, and then we began to play. So he was a college marching band person, and I just loved because and it was a little bit longer than this, but he really drew out this like tension, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're on a battlefield, and then they're in a marching band, and it was great. And I told this person how much I loved his personal statement, and he kind of laughed because I think he was surprised I remembered it. But I really loved it talked about his dedication to marching band and how hard it was, and I love learning about different things. Marching band is something I don't know very much about. And so I really enjoyed that one too. So a few points. So I think there's a common misconception that you need to have done something truly extraordinary in your life to first get into medical school and then to get into residency. And that's not the case. So I've been trying to give you guys lots of examples of very, normal daily life sort of things that you can write about. So things that are important to you, that's important to me reading your personal statement. I think it is really important, like I said, to have another person review your personal statement, both for content and then for grammar. So a lot of medical students I talk with, they reach out to their college friends who were, English majors, and they say, hey, can you read this? The English major may have no idea what you're talking about in your personal statement. They probably will. I mean, I think we can all pick up on these things, but they help them with grammar. So I think that's a great idea to have. But then again, don't ask everybody, because then you're going to get tons of conflicting viewpoints and it's going to be a little bit challenging. I put this in here, keep it to one page. So this is not like if your personal statement goes like a little bit over one page, this is not a make or break deal. Okay, I am fine scrolling that little bit to see those like few sentences. The time I get concerned is when it's 2, 3, 4 pages. And, my main concern then is if you can't like synthesize a personal statement and put it into one page, how long are my rounds going to be when I'm with you? Are you going to present a patient for 25 minutes when you could have said it in 5? So this is where, the guidelines want you to do about one page. So do about one page. You could do a little bit over, and I'm not going to I don't think people are going to dock you for that, but really aim for one page. And really, the purpose of talking with you guys now, once again, I don't know exactly where you are in your journeys through medical school or residency, but I think it's really nice to start reflecting now on topics that you might want to cover in your personal statement. Because sometimes when you get to that point and you have to write it, it's all of a sudden this like your brain shuts down like mine did when I couldn't think of Grey's Anatomy. Give yourself time so you can kind of sit and stew on these things. And you'll probably have a lot more than one idea if you give yourself some more time to think about it. So my summary slide before we get to questions from you guys from the audience. So it really is your time to shine, this personal statement. So really tell your own story. Pick a theme, stick with it, carry it through the statement. Start thinking of them right now. You don't have to write everything out right now, but boy, you could write about like an impactful experience, and then you can always flesh it out later. That will really help future you when you're writing personal statements. Ask someone to look at it. And then I wanted to leave some time, and I think I was successful. Yes, we're only about 10 after 6, and leaving some time for you guys. If you guys have questions about the application process, or if you have questions about personal statements, I am more than happy to answer anything you might have. So I'll just wait here while you guys think about it. All right, we got one in the chat. Any recommendations for personal statements if someone ends? Oh, great. Yes, dual applying. Okay. Yeah, so lots. So first off, it does sort of depend what you're dual applying to, right? So a lot of fields have a lot of similarities. So if you're, but I would suspect if I'm guessing, a lot of these are applying to a very competitive specialty like dermatology, ophthalmology, plastic surgery, and then maybe one to one less competitive, right? So like internal medicine, family medicine, something like that. So I would recommend having 2 different personal statements. The reason being, I've read quite a few where people are dual applying to, like, I'll give the example dermatology, and it's very obvious to me when they're only talking about their dermatology research in dermatology patients that they're dual applying. Now, does that turn me off? Not necessarily, right? Because most people dual applying to dermatology and internal medicine are very good applicants. But I want to see that you actually care about internal medicine. And if you use the exact same statement that you used for dermatology and then for internal medicine, it doesn't come off quite as well. So I would just take some of those themes, if you wanted to show, your interest in, you don't want to show your, I wouldn't say like play up your interest in dermatology in your internal medicine statement, but I think going for themes. So whether it's like some of those life experiences, more just general drawing to medicine type of things, but I would recommend changing it, for the different subspecialties. And I don't know if that helped. So if you have another like more specific question, yeah, please ask. But I think that's a great question. And I also would recommend having someone from each specialty that you're applying to look at the ones you're using to apply. Because I've seen a lot of students who really want to have a backup option, and I have no qualms with that. And so then I read through their application for internal medicine and try to help them out with their personal statement. Okay, another
I
one.
have
Oh, this,
oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Go
No, go ahead.
ahead. I just had a question about, so I know sometimes there's spaces for like talking about meaningful experiences or important experiences. And so, how do we like not pull too much from our personal statements, or what should be paralleled, or what kind of content should be repeated and not repeated?
Yeah, that's a great, great question, because now you guys can put in these meaningful experiences, right? So I think that a lot of people I see using the same experience, but they are more detailed and give more depth to the special circumstances that they kind of list in the one part of the ARIS application, and then they put more information about it in the personal statement. Now, some people would say, well, if you have more, like, use the space to tell me as much as you possibly can. So I am never offended when people like use that meaningful experience to talk about the same thing they talk about in their personal statement, right? Because that's it's probably like the biggest impact in their life, right? And so never offended by that. And I never think people are slacking because of that. That being said, if you have other things you want to make sure you communicate, then I would add that into your personal statement. Does that help?
Yes, yeah, that does help. So it's okay to repeat it, but you still want to stay unique to that space.
Right, right. And I think, I will tell you, some people don't read all of your application. And so if you like put it in your meaningful experiences and then your personal statement too, some people might not read your personal statement, but if it's like the most important part of your entire application, then duplicating it is just fine. You want to get that point across. Okay. Let's see. Another one talks, oh, this is, yeah, great. So what's your opinion on talking about parents being physicians? So, and this person kind of says they're the biggest inspiration, but I don't know how to say that well. So I think this is great. So I think that's being honest, right? This is what you grew up with. And I've read a lot of personal statements talking about how their parents really inspired them in the medical career. I give like specific examples, like, I don't know, I've really enjoyed some of the ones where they talk about like their family dinners, like their mom was a gastroenterologist, and so they always talked about disgusting things at dinner or something, something kind of funny and kind of lighthearted. But I think that that's, that's very much a calling for people, and they discover it early when their parents are physicians. And so I feel like that's a great thing to talk about. And I would also say, it also says that you understand what a physician's life is like. And that can also kind of help, right? Okay, another person says, oh yeah, this is a good one. So commenting on including impactful experiences from a rotation other than the specialty you are applying to. Great. So once again, I think that I've had like a lot of people have kind of like pointed out when they're on like certain rotations, they were excited about it, but they didn't really want to do it. Or they had a very meaningful experience, let's say on a surgical rotation. And sorry, I'm giving another internal medicine example, I apologize. But they might say like, gosh, I really wanted to talk with the patients more, and I wanted to be on the wards taking care of them and not in the OR. So that's when they learned their love for internal medicine. Or, if you want to do a surgical subspecialty, maybe you could write about how you hated rounds, and you wanted to be in the OR. Like, I think another example, I was just talking with somebody about emergency medicine. So they're talking about how much they love emergency medicine, but they're constantly like, what happened though? What did that person have? And that was how they figured out that they didn't want to do emergency medicine. They wanted to do internal medicine. So totally fine. I think as long as you're framing it that I had this experience on this rotation, and this is why I want to do your subspecialty type of thing. I love this next question. So how personal is too personal? Can we talk about our own mental health? So I've read a lot of wonderful personal statements talking about health in general, right? So mental health, physical health, emotional health. And I really appreciate it. And I would say, this is my opinion. If you write about a medical issue, a psychiatric issue, whatever issue it is, and the program doesn't like you for that, you don't want to be at that program. So personal experience here, I have type 1 diabetes, and I actually wrote about my personal statement was writing about when I was diagnosed with diabetes. And I had the same thought. I thought, gosh, but what if programs don't want me because I have type 1 diabetes? And then I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be there. If those were my feelings on it. So, are you going to maybe have some people that would, discriminate against you for that? It's possible, but that's their loss, like I feel like there's this quote, now I'm not going to remember who it's from, but it says something to the effect of, if I show you my vulnerability, I hope you will see my strength. And I think that's a really important thing for personal statements, because you're opening up and sharing something really personal. And so I think it's up to the reader to see your strengths. All right, another one. So how would you talk about wanting to do IM in order to, subspecialize further? Great question. So thinking about a subspecialty, but should I talk, like how much to talk about a subspecialty? So I love this question because I have strong feelings on this. So I am absolutely fine when people say, I found that I really love cardiology or I love gastroenterology. But I really don't want your personal statement to only talk about that subspecialty, because to me, that comes across as like, I don't really want to do internal medicine. I just want to bypass it and go to that subspecialty. So I'd be careful. It's fine to mention like, certain areas of medicine that you're interested in for internal medicine, but don't simply focus on the fellowship that you want to go to. Because, when I was reviewing applications, I always thought, I'm an internal medicine associate program director. I'm not a cardiology associate program director. I'm not taking you because you want to do cardiology. I'm taking you because you want to do internal medicine. So I would be careful with that. Like I said, mention it if that's like a love that you have, but don't only talk about that. Hope that helped. And if any of you guys who have like sent these questions have follow-up questions, please like put them in the chat or chat with me about it, because I want to make sure that I'm answering your questions for you. I'm really thankful that you guys all joined. Thank you for the great questions.